Hello class, in this lesson we're going to be covering lesson number 13, Hot Zones in the Cold War. Here we have American soldiers fighting in the Vietnam War. American military service during the Cold War. A strong military was the key to America's victory over the Soviet Union in the Cold War. And what we're going to deal with in this particular lesson are the major hot zones of the Cold War. Millions of Americans served in the military during the Cold War in combat and in supporting services. Their service was often at great personal and family sacrifice, yet they did their duty. And in many cases, their service was not well respected in American society upon their return. So the major hot zones that we're going to be covering in lesson 13 are the Korean War, the Vietnam War, and the Cuban Missile Crisis. Here we can see a graph that just sort of shows you the defense spending as a percentage of the federal spending, and at its height in 1960, and even you can see a increase there in 1966 to 1968. A lot of that had to do with America's entry into the Vietnam War. The Korean War, 1950 to 1953. In June of 1950, 90,000 North Koreans invaded the American and UN-sponsored democratic government in North Korea. North Korea was supported by the Soviets through military training and, of course, military supply, notably weapons supply. American Army General Douglas MacArthur, who had led American Army forces in the Pacific during World War II and had overseen the American occupation of Japan at the end of World War II, arrived in South Korea in late June of 1950 to command not only American forces but also UN forces in the Korean War. President Harry S. Truman sent American soldiers to join the UN effort to stop the North Korean invasion. Through August and September of 1950, MacArthur's combined forces stopped the North Korean invasion and began to push the North Koreans back across the 38th degree parallel, which was the DMZ, demilitarized zone, that then divided North and South Korea and still divides North and South Korea to this day. This is General Douglas MacArthur, Dugout Doug, who had served in World War I, World War II, and will serve as military commander of American and UN forces in the Korean War. Korean War, 1950 to 1953. South Korea encouraged MacArthur and UN forces to continue to push beyond the 38th degree parallel in an attempt to reunite Korea under democratic rule. MacArthur wanted to invade China because China had fallen to communism, as we covered in lesson 12, and supported the North Korean communist government. American involvement in the Korean War in the early 1950s reflected the American policy of containment of communism that we laid out in lesson 12 through the Truman Doctrine, not to allow communism to spread. The Battle of Bloody Ridge was the largest battle of the war. It was fought from August 18th to September 5th, 1951. MacArthur announced that the UN forces should invade China and possibly use nuclear bombs in an attempt to bring the war to an end and to bring China out of the war. Obviously, Harry S. Truman and the United Nations were not interested because this could potentially touch off World War III, and large-scale nuclear war would not have been good on a global scale because the Soviets had already begun testing nuclear weapons and atomic bombs as a result of the Klaus Fuchs spy ring that we discussed in lesson 12 that the green glasses and the Rosenbergs were connected to. So, as a result, Harry S. Truman relieved Douglas MacArthur of his command. This is still one of the most hotly debated um, issues of this era. Obviously, MacArthur had a great deal of resentment for being removed from command, but Truman, with the motto of the buck stops here, believed that he needed to remove MacArthur from command to prevent future uh, global war on the scale of potentially creating not only nuclear war but World War III. An armistice was ultimately signed, a ceasefire, on July 27, 1953, and the line was drawn between the divided country at the 38th degree parallel latitude. The war ended right where it began. So, what we have on this map is the North Korean invasion that started the Korean War. We have the UN sponsored amphibious assault and the movement into North Korea all the way to the border of North Korea and China. This is an American soldier during the Korean War. I have had the great honor to meet multiple Korean War veterans, and it was not only ground combat with infantry, but a significant amount of artillery and tank warfare during the Korean War as well. One common experience that every veteran that I've ever talked to that served in the Korean War said that it was the coldest they had ever been in their lives. The Korean War is commonly referred to as the Forgotten War because it was stuck between World War II and the Vietnam War, and it was also a war that ultimately ended with an armistice and a stalemate with the ceasefire along the 38th degree parallel. And here we have President Harry S. Truman, who was president of the United States during the Korean War, and also the U.S. president that was responsible for the containment policy known as the Truman Doctrine. So, please let me know if you all have any questions related to the Korean War and the American involvement in the Korean War. Thank you very much.